Hey there, Empowered Tribe. It's Angela T. Moore. You're getting ready to experience the next episode of Empowered, a health and wellness podcast where I share my personal journey of health and healing, tips for mental and physical health, interviews with health and wellness experts and those bold enough and vulnerable enough to share their own journeys to empower you to succeed in yours. We know that life can be rewarding. It can also be challenging. It has its ups and downs, highs and lows. I learned that with a strong mind and a fit body, you are better able to grow through and grow from whatever life throws your way. My goal is to share journeys of health and wellness, as well as tips and information from extraordinary people all around the world to help you live an empowered life. My guest, Dr. Charletta Dennis, is the Medical Director of Behavioral Health at Priority Health and serves as the main psychiatrist on staff. Dr. Dennis conducts peer reviews to determine the appropriate level of care for patients and plays a vital role in increasing access to mental health services statewide. Her role is critical in ensuring Priority Health members receive the right care at the right place and at the right time. In this episode, Dr. Dennis shares her amazing journey from growing up in tough neighborhoods in Detroit to becoming a psychiatrist. From a swing shift at White Castle to an EMT program, medical assistant to nursing student, and eventually medical school, Dr. Dennis successfully completed her degree while balancing her responsibilities as a mother. Dr. Dennis emphasized the importance of resilience and finding solutions to challenges. Her journey illustrates the need to live in one's purpose and being open to new and evolving opportunities. I hope you enjoy the episode. Dr. Dennis, in my Empowered Health and Wellness podcast, I share my personal journey of health and healing, tips for mental and physical health, interviews with health experts, and those bold enough and vulnerable enough to share their own journeys to empower others to succeed in theirs. You are a very wonderful, phenomenal person. I've had the great honor of interviewing you on my radio show a couple times, and I heard recently that you have an amazing story that I want to share with my listeners on my new podcast. And so, can you talk about how you arrived where you are today?
I most certainly can. Well, first, I want to thank you for having me on your show. This is a great opportunity, and I really appreciate it. There's so many places I could start. I think I like to begin with telling people that I didn't choose to become a psychiatrist. I honestly believe that this field actually chose me. I'm born and raised in Detroit, lived in, some of the toughest neighborhoods in Detroit. And when I was young, there was no thought of me becoming a physician. It was not even an idea for me, not even idea. But what I can say is I've always had this sense of urgency at being someone, doing something, making sure that, I didn't have to remain in the worst neighborhoods in Detroit. It was always something that I wanted to do. I didn't want that to be my future. Didn't want it to be my future. At a very, very young age, I always did very well in school. Despite, some of the challenges growing up on the west side of Detroit. I was a teen mom. And I believe having my son was one of the things that really sparked my career. Let me back up. I knew that I had to take care of my child. So I knew that I had to do something that would really ensure that he didn't have to grow up in poverty. Okay. When I was pregnant with Troy, I was working at White Castle. I was you know, on a swing shift at White Castle, days, afternoons, nights. And I can remember one night these two gentlemen came into White Castle, and
Mhm.
they were EMTs, and they were talking to, the staff about them starting a new program. And, that is really what started my journey into healthcare. Because again, before that, I had no inklings of, going to school to do anything healthcare related. So I ended up taking that class. I ended up taking,
Let me
um,
stop you. I want to go back because
okay,
okay,
okay.
let me make sure I understand how this all started. Because so you're working at White Castle on swing shift, as you
Uh,
mentioned,
uh,
and you're
uh.
overhearing this conversation that these two MTs are having. What were they talking about, and what was it about? What was it about what they were talking about that drew your attention?
So they were talking about this class to become an emergency medical technologies, EMT. This school was just starting up, and I think it was the idea of being in healthcare. And of course, they talking about, how much you could make back then. And back then, I had to be, I was either 17 or 18 years old at the time. And
Okay.
back then, at White Castle, I was making maybe $5, $6 an hour. And they were talking about, this course where I could make upwards of $15 an hour as an EMT. So I'm like, hey, sign me up. What,
Yeah.
what can I do? So that's when, and they talked about, being on an ambulance, going on these rides and, helping people out. And that conversation was exciting to me. So I decided I'm going to take this course.
Okay.
Um, mhm. So, and I'm sorry, at that time, I, I was, I had my son already. He was already maybe 2 years old at the time, a year or two at the
Okay.
time. So I had
Okay.
already had my son. So I ended up taking the course and actually hated it.
You said you hated it.
Hated
What are
it.
the chances of that you actually hated it? The thing that changed your interest and you're like, I hate this.
And what I hated about it was, and it wasn't the caring for people. It was the other stuff that surrounded it. It was going into homes where I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know, the very first run I had to go on. Now, I'm 18, 17, 18 years old at the time.
Okay.
And, I'm all of 112 pounds, maybe back then.
Okay.
So I'm riding along on this ambulance, and the first run we had to go on, we had to go up a flight of stairs, and it was a gentleman who had a heart attack. And this guy was humongous. He was huge. And I had to assist in getting him on the stretcher and bringing him down the stairs. And it was just not the glorious idea of being being an EMT that I really pictured. So,
Well, that you see on television.
yeah, exactly. It was a bit more challenging than I had anticipated.
Okay.
Um, so it was just, mm, it wasn't for me. I really felt, if there's going to be a problem, I'd rather it come to me than me go to it.
Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha.
So that subsequently did not work out for me. So I decided, and of course, time went on. You
Mm.
have to go through the class and take exams and all of that. But in the interim, I'm still working at White Castle because I
Mm.
really, I had health insurance at White Castle. I had dental insurance, even vision insurance, and of course, I was a mom at the time, so I had to really make a decision as to what my career was going to look like. I did fall in love with the idea of healthcare, being in the health field at some point. And it wasn't until I was pregnant with my second, pregnant with Teray, that I decided to go to school to become a medical assistant.
Got you. Okay.
Yes, I decided to become a medical assistant, and I worked for the Henry Ford Health System for a few years as a medical assistant. And then it was the doctors at Henry Ford who encouraged me to go back to school. When I
Gotcha.
was a medical assistant, Henry Ford was sending their then unlicensed assistive personnel. So it could have been a medical assistant, a nursing assistant. They were selecting a few to go to school and become registered nurses. So I was one of the ones chosen for that program, and I received my bachelor's of science in nursing from the University of Detroit Mercy. But while I was in nursing school,
Mhm.
one of the doctors I worked with, Dr. Mark Lewis, God rest his soul,
Yeah.
I showed him my very first report card, my very
Okay.
first set of grades, and it was all science classes, and I had a 4.0, and he was like, "Girl, you on your way to medical school." These are his exact words, and I can still, hear these words from him. And it was that moment I
Yeah.
took a step back and was like, "Oh, wait, so I can become a doctor?
Mhm.
I could be a doctor?" And from that moment on, it was that was my direction. That was my focus. I knew I had to finish my degree, my bachelor's degree, because I had a 2-year commitment. Once I received my nursing degree, I had a 2-year commitment with Henry Ford to work as a nurse before I could move on.
Okay.
And while I was working as a nurse for Henry Ford, I decided to study to take my MCAT exam to apply to medical school. So I was working as a nurse, you know, working midnights and getting up, getting home, making sure the kids get off to school and then go to class. And it was a just move it, just do it
Yeah.
type of thing. I didn't have, time to think about this not working. It
Yeah.
wasn't an option for me, or it wasn't a thought for me. So I went boom, 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 from school to work, take care of the kids, that kind of thing. And when I was in when I was actually in nursing school,
Mhm.
there were two professors that had two different ideas of who I would be or who I would become.
Mhm.
One of them, she actually pulled me to the side and said, "You know what? You probably should go for advanced practice nursing." So she's looking at me as a person, how I'm doing in my clinicals, how I'm doing in my classes,
Mhm.
and said I should think about becoming a nurse practitioner or a nurse midwife. Um, and another professor of mine, I shared with this professor that I was going to go to medical school once I finished my bachelor's degree.
Mhm.
And his response to me was, "It's highly unlikely that you'll become a physician." So I had two different professionals with two different ideas of who I would be, who I would become, what my future would look like. And had I taken what he said and took it to heart, I
Mhm.
probably would not be here today. But I think subconsciously that lit a fire. Like, who are you to tell me what if
Yeah.
I say I'm going to do something, I am going to do it. And who are you to say, it's highly unlikely? So
Yeah.
I think that's one of the statements that still resonate with me.
Mhm.
Um, and it just made me want to just continue on, just keep going and going and going.
You
So
make me
I,
think of something. I want to make sure I create time for this because this makes me think about something that I've openly shared in my writings as well as in interviews that I've done. I talk about when after my mother had passed away, and I was really, really in a really significant state of grief. I was really struggling, and I had gone out for the track team in the 10th grade, and I ran, and the track coach came up to me and he said, "You're going to get a full track scholarship to school." And I
Wow.
remember those words really gave me hope at a time when I didn't have any hope. But what you
Mm,
make me think about is previously to that, I remember at one point going out, I want to say for cheerleading. One time I tried basketball, and I'm very
mhm,
athletic, so I do have that
mhm.
athleticism, athletic ability. And I remember actually attempting to run, but the track coach at the time had me running the wrong event. I'm
Oh,
a true long sprinter,
okay.
true long
Okay.
sprinter. Now, what was interesting though is had I stayed and continued to run the events that the first coach was having, I would have never excelled as a runner. I would have done okay because I will say I am athletic. I would do well.
Hmm.
But when I found myself on the track that very
Hmm.
significant day, which was really a life-changing moment because
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
coach saw my potential
Hmm.
and he spoke the necessary words that made me see myself in a better way, in a higher way. And I
Hmm.
remember coming back and I was running, and I remember I got second place in one race, and he said, "Don't do that again."
Oh, wow. Wow.
And by the time I was a junior, like I was getting offers to full scholarships. And you got to
Mm.
understand, Dr. Dennis, I got a full track scholarship to the University of
Wow.
Virginia. That is not that's a major accomplishment.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely, right? So I just wanted to share that with you because, and from that, you took if you look at where I was at that time and no hope, living in a not a economically stable situation, definitely not positioned to excel and be successful in life, and where I've come today with numerous degrees and certifications and a very
Hmm.
successful business and organization and all the things that I've been able to accomplish in my life never would have happened if I had listened to that first person, if I'd stayed within what she saw me as and just thought I was just this average runner. So thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah.
Yes, it's absolutely amazing that you were able to take that and make it your own, make it for you, and not
Mhm.
to succumb to the negativity, not to succumb to anything that would hold you back or keep you stagnant. So that's absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah. So going back, so now here you are. I'm going to go back and see how I can do this because I'm a
Mhm.
therapist. I can like hear the story and go back and come back up and everything, get right back to where we were. So
Absolutely.
yes, so here you are now, in medical school. Okay, you're going to
Mhm.
medical school. What was that like for you?
For me, um, it was time consuming.
Mhm.
It was definitely time consuming. I would not say that it was hard. I would not say that, I struggled. Um, I would say it was just time consuming because at, I had my two kids at the time. I had to make it work for me. Thankfully, the first 2 years of medical school was straight classwork, and I didn't have to be on campus most of the time. A
Okay.
lot of the lectures were recorded, so, I could do whatever it is I'm doing, making sure the kids are, at school, fed, and all of that, and turn on my lectures at 9, 10, 11 p.m. at night and get through that and show up for exams, that kind of thing. So medical school was it was just time consuming. And I had to make sure it's definitely for someone who can manage their time wisely
Mm-hmm.
and can, meet deadlines, that kind of thing. So you definitely have to you have to have a certain level of maturity
Mm-hmm.
in order to succeed in medical school. And I think because I was employed at such an early age, I learned the monotony of getting up and doing this and doing that. I learned that schedule. I learned how to make the time what I needed it to be. So the first 2 years, book work, great. Tragedy did strike when I was in medical school. My son actually was in a situation where he and a couple of his friends were shot.
I'm sorry.
And that definitely took a toll on my education at that time.
Mm-hmm.
But I still ended up finishing.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, I didn't allow the things to happen around me to stop my goals, my personal goals. I did have support. I had a bunch of family support when my son was shot. So I had, my best friends at the hospital feeding them, when they know I'm in class, that kind of thing. So I did have the support to get through that.
Mm-hmm.
But, each challenge, you just kind of, find a way to make it through. And I think for me, I'm personally, I'm not the type that dwell on what the problem is. I don't like looking at problems. I like looking at solutions. I've
Mm-hmm.
always been solution oriented. How can I get from point A to point B? I'm not concerned about what got me at point A. I
Gotcha.
want to know what's going to get me to point B. So, those types of challenges that I had allowed me to carry on.
Gotcha. Now, one of the things that I've recognized throughout my life, and I think that maybe it's something that is inherent in people who come from challenging environments. I think you have this level of resilience that allows you to push through difficult times from what it would appear from the outside with relative ease.
Mhm, mhm,
And
mhm,
and it's interesting because I try to get people to really from those difficult situations because oftentimes we think because we come from certain environments from difficult situations we don't have the ability, the intelligence, the aptitude, the or the stick to itiveness, to
yes.
push through and get things done when really oftentimes you really have all that and then some. And so really if you
Mhm,
can get the opportunity, you typically can have more than the ability to excel in any situations that you find yourself in. And even when challenges come your way, you've had challenges along the way. So it's like, okay,
mhm,
challenge, but gotta keep doing, gotta keep going, not gonna
mhm,
quit.
mhm.
Would you say that you agree with that?
I absolutely agree. I believe if we don't have challenges, you don't know who you can become. Our challenges make us who we are, whether the challenges defeat us
Mhm.
or whether or not we jump over those challenges. They make us who we are. And definitely resilience is not, I don't think it's something that you learn. I think it's something that's inherent in you. And it, it, it strikes when there's something that you're faced with that you say, absolutely not.
Mhm.
This is not going to be it for me. This is not going to be my life.
Mhm.
So I definitely believe being resilient is something that comes from what you feel inside, what you think, and what you want. If there's nothing that's driving you,
Mhm.
then you're gonna stay in the same spot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I actually believe that if you're not doing what you were created and purposed to do, I think there will be this like feeling of discontentment that you will constantly be
Mhm,
seeking um to satisfy and you won't be able to.
mhm, mhm. You know, there's I think twofold on that. I definitely agree people should live in their purpose. And if they haven't figured out what that is, or if they're not on a trajectory and can see it, there is going to be a certain level of longing. But also, as times change, people change.
Yeah.
So, what may have been for you, may 5 years ago, may not be for the person who you are today, because
I love
we
that you
learn
said
so
that.
much, we grow
Yeah.
so much, we do so much, things actually change for us. So we have to change with our experiences.
Yeah, I love that you said that because it's funny that I will add to one thing because you said that. And that is actually what I try to teach my clients is that I
Mhm.
feel like you don't only have one purpose. Like as you evolve, so does that thing that you were purposed and intended to do. And I
Yes,
actually
yes.
recommend to people that even if you think that you have found your purpose and have settled peacefully into that, like don't close the door to other
Mhm,
things
mhm.
because I feel like I have to say we have multiple colors. We're multidimensional. We have a lot of different parts of us. And I think it's important throughout your life as you evolve to be constantly trying to seek things that support how you've evolved. Yeah,
Mhm.
because otherwise you
Absolutely.
stay stuck doing maybe the thing that you started doing. But I'm sure if you've recognized, even in your medical career, you probably recognized that what you started doing has evolved and you have many different things that you've done within that and maybe separate from that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There has been, when I first um, graduated from medical school, and I did my residency at Henry Ford, which was absolutely amazing. I did my fellowship in forensic psychiatry at the University of Michigan. And at the time, all I could think about was being this psychiatrist that worked in the correctional setting. I do these evaluations for criminal responsibility and competence to stand trial. And um, that's really what I enjoyed, during my fellowship. But once I completed my fellowship, I really had to look at what do I want my life to be like.
Hmm.
I definitely had to gain that experience as a new psychiatrist. So I worked on an inpatient unit at Sparrow Hospital and really absolutely loved that. And then after a few years of doing that, okay, now it's time to transition to something else. So I worked for a company in which I worked at Wayne County Jail, and I became the director for Wayne County Jails. And then after that contract ended with that company, I was promoted to the director of the Michigan Department of Corrections for this company. So I was over the prisons, the psychiatric programs for the prisons in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And each step allowed me to grow
Yeah.
as an individual and grow as a professional.
Mm-hmm.
So changes came, and I changed with what I really felt the need was.
Yeah.
I had to adapt to being this being different from what I had intended my life would be as a physician.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting because when I was initially thinking about your interview and when I was originally approached about interviewing you, I was going to interview you, which I will do in a moment, specifically about your work with Priority Health. And
Mhm.
as I was preparing for today's interview, and I'm looking over your bio, and I'm preparing my questions that I was gonna ask you today, I noticed that as I was reading through your bio, the different things that you had done. And I think that you are a true example of what I was just talking about a few minutes ago, about as we evolve and we seek opportunities that allow us to evolve and maximize those opportunities. And I didn't say this, one of the things that I've discovered is that often what you have done is prepare you for a bigger and higher level for something that you're going to be doing
Yes.
later, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think it's to your advantage that when those opportunities come, to not shy away from it, be intimidated by it, but to step boldly into it. And I've said this before, and sometimes you got to grow into it. And so
Yes.
don't let an opportunity that even seems higher than where you feel where you see yourself, don't let it
Mhm.
you don't let it keep you from stepping into it because you're afraid. Step in it afraid, and know that if the door of opportunity open, you're perfectly aligned and positioned to step into it, and that's what you should do.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that.
So I mentioned Priority Health. So
Mhm.
your mission as part of Priority Health is to positively impact the mental health of Michiganders. I always think that's so funny the way they say that, Michiganders. I'm a Virginia girl. I'm born in Chicago, raised in Virginia. So I always think it's funny when I say that. So can you talk about your role with Priority Health?
Yes, so Priority Health, I am a medical director for Priority Health. I'm the only psychiatrist on staff, so my role is with is two-part. While I am a medical director and I'm part of the medical director team, I'm also part of the behavioral health team.
Gotcha.
So what I do is I take a look at the cases for our um, insured individuals who have priority health. And my role is to ensure that people are receiving the right care at the right place and at the right time. So my role is to make sure one, providers are providing evidence-based care. Does this person need to be inpatient right now? Does this person need to be in partial hospitalization programming? Does this patient needs to be outpatient? So I take a look and see what is the medical necessity that warrants whatever level of care an individual needs to be in. And, making sure that our, the individuals of Michigan have the proper resources that they need.
Mhm.
They have, do they need a care manager on their team? Do they need resources for the community? Ensuring that our members are receiving the care that they need at the time that they need and the place that they need to receive the care at.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Wow, what an amazing thing to be able to do.
It, I absolutely love when you work as a physician, when you work in on different sides of the house, you work on the care side of the house where you're delivering the care, and then the managed care side where you want to make sure that there's resources for people that need the resources and that they're appropriate, because we want to make sure that people can receive what they need, but we also want to make sure that there's enough to go around for the people that need the care.
Gotcha.
Even though Priority Health has over 1 million members, not all of those members receive behavioral health services because not all the members have issues like depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. Not all of the members have those type of diagnoses or illnesses, but we want to ensure that people are receiving the care that they need.
Okay. Now, one of the things that I do as a therapist, I try to really advocate for people see in mental health just like we do physical health. Because of course, there is the need, of course, for those diagnoses, as you said, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, anxiety, depression. But one of the things I've recognized is that there are oftentimes behaviors that put you on a path towards those mental health diagnoses. And then there's things that you can do from a proactive strategy after you receive a diagnosis and after you receive treatment to keep you as healthy as possible mentally and physically. And I often have recognized too, I'll also have recognized that there's also a stigma, especially in the Black population, that is associated with mental health that keeps people who really need mental health treatment from receiving it. And I feel like if we had more dialogue and conversation where we saw mental health just like we do physical health as something that you do all the time, you're constantly doing those things that are necessary to reduce stress, to maintain, to manage anxiety, all those different things, that when someone has a crisis or when someone finds themselves experiencing signs and symptoms of different mental health illnesses, that they would be more likely to take advantage of those services because they see it as just like, okay, I go to the doctor for my annual exams and I'm sick. So I'm going to go to the doctor and get medication for that. It's no different than mental health.
I tell people all the time, and I use an analogy so that people would understand when I talk to patients, when I talk to family, friends. Let's say you have depression, right? People who don't get treatment for their depression, whether it's psychotherapy or medication, depression, it's probably going to get worse if it's not treated. Okay, so people who have depression, they can have difficulty sleeping, difficulty eating, and when it's severe, they can have thoughts of suicide. And people who are depressed and untreated or poorly treated, they sometimes succumb to suicide. Okay, so they're succumbing to that illness. Let's take diabetes, for instance. If your diabetes is poorly controlled, you're not taking your insulin, you're not taking your pills, you're not eating right, which is a form of changing the way you eat, is a form of it's a psychotherapeutic type of treatment. Okay, and people usually don't look at it that way when you change your behaviors. So you're changing the way you eat. Okay, if you're not taking your insulin, if you're not eating right, your blood sugars are going to get worse. You're probably going to have maybe a diabetic coma or develop ketoacidosis, and you're probably going to die. Okay, so illnesses need treatment. And it doesn't matter if it's a mental illness or a physical illness, because guess what? Your mind is connected to your lungs connected to your heart, all of this is connected. And I love for people to understand that these are medical conditions, whether it's depression, schizophrenia, hypertension, diabetes. These are medical conditions.
Yeah.
They are medical. I don't care if one is in the box of somatic and one is in the box of mental. These are medical conditions that require professional treatment.
Yes. Yes. And thank you so much for stating that in such a phenomenal way, because hopefully people that will listen to the podcast will be motivated to think about mental health differently because of some of the things that we said today. That truly is my mission, through my organization, is to really try to get people to take care of themselves mentally and physically, and to be very aware of the things that they do that contribute to being unwell mentally and physically. And I'm so glad that you mentioned nutrition. That's something that I don't think that people often associate with mental health, or in some ways in physical health. I'll have a lot of people who think that just because they exercise, they can eat whatever. And or people, and this would be really significant. And when I mentioned to you earlier in the interview that my mom died that my mom died when I was younger, and that I was
Mhm.
grieving at the time before I went out for track. Now she was genetically thin. She looked fit. But when she had her stroke, her blood pressure was 280 over 220, you
Wow.
know? And what
Wow.
was amazing, and what is actually a significant motivating factor for why I do what I do, is that not only did I have that experience of holding my mom while she had a stroke, wiping vomit from her mouth, going through that experience and
Mhm.
seeing her die, not at the time, not at that point, but after she went to the hospital and she was pretty much, she's hooked a machine, she's no longer there. Her kidneys are not working. She's slowly
Mhm.
dying.
Mhm.
And then eventually the decision was
Mhm.
made to unplug her. She's truly gone at this point. When I went home, and I'm 13, I'm going through her items there. I'm asked to get her items for the funeral home. I'm finding little notes that she had been writing to herself. Depressed, need to get my life together, depressed. She was just
Mhm.
clinically depressed. And so, not
Mhm.
in addition to the fact that she was physically unwell, she was mentally unwell, and she had been suffering for quite some
Mhm.
time. And I think about how
Mhm.
many people that are probably walking around that are in a state of unwell. They're sad, they're depressed, they're not taking care of themselves, they're not eating well, they're not exercising. And you have this
Mhm.
series of combination of all these things that they're doing that's harmful to their body. And unfortunately, sometimes it does end up in death, and or a really unfortunate, I think, which is almost worse. I don't say worse than death, but probably the worst thing leading up to death is when you are suffering for quite some time before you die.
Mhm.
That to me is
Mhm.
what's so
Mhm.
sad. And when you talk about like
Mhm.
someone that has untreated depression, and then you have your suicidal ideation, and then that person and then takes their life. It's a life that's gone forever. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I just,
Mhm.
my hope is that, one, I will say that people will be inspired by your story, and that those people who have those hopes, dreams, and aspirations, who find themselves in difficult situations, circumstances, know that it doesn't have to limit them, that they can too become a psychiatrist, they can become an EMT, they can become a nurse, they can really do whatever they're willing to work for. Yeah.
Yes.
And that hopefully also too people will be motivated to take very good care of themselves. I do want to give you the opportunity though, because I know one of the things that is really cute that I love that you do is you work with Priority Pups. And if you can, I would love you to talk about that, your work with Priority Pups.
Yes. Well, Priority Pups, this is a signature program of Priority Health. And the idea behind this is using these animals to help children who may have anxiety, who may have depression, and, placing them in schools throughout Michigan so that this can be a form of association for the kids
Mm,
so that we can address some of these issues. A lot of children have issues with anxiety, issues with depression, issues with
mhm,
self-esteem, issues, within their family structure. And bringing animals in can allow the community to allay some of that. Working with animals is an absolute, it's an absolute beautiful thing. And puppies in general, I don't know of anyone who does not smile when you see, a little pup just running around. And puppies, they are so, they don't have any discriminatory
yeah.
behaviors. They absolutely love children, and these pups, they're actually trained to work with people. These
Mm,
are pups that go throughout serious training to be to be animals that work with people. So this is absolutely amazing. And we look at areas where, there's either high incidences of either depression, anxiety, or, we look at these social determinants of health to decide where these pups are going to go and how much, what types of resources are available for the communities. And when you look at, income, you look at poverty rates, you look at, where's the nearest clinic, where's the nearest mental health facility, where's the nearest hospital. You look at all these determinants, the social determinants of health, and kind of decide where the pups are going to go. The first priority pup, his name is Scout. He went to Muskegon. He was placed in Muskegon because Muskegon has some of the highest rates of mental health crises. So that location was chosen to be the first place to place a priority pup.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Yeah, I'm an avid dog lover. I've had dogs my whole life. This is the first time that I haven't had a dog. My beautiful pup, not a pup, well, old dog, Bowser, passed away at 17. So, yeah,
Oh, wow.
poor thing looked like he was 17 too. But definitely brought a lot of joy to my life. All my pets have, and I've seen how dogs really have a positive impact on lives. And like you said, who can like not look at a puppy and not smile? I mean, it's just you have to smile when you see a puppy. And I am excited though about that because I'm excited to see that some efforts are made to figure out creative ways to reach children in ways
Yes.
that they can be impacted and influenced in a positive way. And as you said, pups, they don't discriminate. They really don't. And a kid is going to, in a challenging situation, is going to feel the love of that pup and also feel the peace that that pup brings. So I'm really excited about that.
Yes.
I want to thank you so
Yes.
much for taking your time to spend it with me. I thank you so much for all the amazing work that you've done throughout your life, all the wonderful lives that I know that you've enriched by your work. And I am I'm really honored to have a chance to speak with you once again, but more so on a personal perspective. Because Dr. Dennis, I've interviewed
Yes.
you a couple times, and I did not know your amazing story, and I'm so glad that I had the opportunity and honor to hear it.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate being a guest on your show. You are absolutely amazing. And I absolutely love the fact that you are a therapist. I had no clue and I absolutely love it. So you keep doing exactly what you're
Thank
doing.
you. I will. I truly will.
Thanks for listening to Empower It with Angela T. Moore. Feel free to share this episode with someone you think would enjoy it. New episodes come out weekly. Follow our show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening right now.